The Galactic Intelligence Bureau's field report on Species 7834b. Designation: Humans. Filed by Observer Quill 9 of the 3rd Reconnaissance Division. Warning: this species continues to defy all logical behavioral patterns. You know, in my 400 cycles of studying various sentient species across 17 star systems, I thought I had seen everything. Beings who breathed methane, creatures that communicated through color changes, even those ridiculous six-headed Zephyrians who argued with themselves constantly. But humans? Oh, humans take the prize for absolute certified insanity. Take this particular specimen, for instance. Her designation? Maggie Torres, age 47, occupation: retired park ranger turned apparent lunatic. The human female had recently acquired what her species calls a divorce, essentially a legal separation from her mate due to what she termed irreconcilable differences. Translation: her former partner preferred watching sports broadcasts to actually participating in outdoor activities. Naturally, this led to the complete dissolution of their pair bond. Now, any reasonable being would find appropriate shelter in a population center, perhaps seek counseling, maybe join a social group. But Maggie? Oh no. She decided to purchase a cabin in the Rocky Mountains for the bargain price of 5 monetary units. 5. I've seen humans spend more on flavored water. Best $5 I ever spent, she muttered to herself while driving her primitive combustion vehicle up a winding mountain path that would terrify a Kraken pilot. The road, if you could even call it that, looked like it had been carved by particularly vindictive mountain goats with anger management issues. Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 94.3% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. The reason for the cabin's incredibly low price became apparent as soon as our surveillance drone spotted it through the tree line. The structure was what humans optimistically call a fixer-upper, though complete disaster requiring divine intervention might be more accurate. Half the roof had collapsed. One wall leaned at an angle that violated several laws of physics, and the entire foundation appeared to be held together by stubbornness and possibly some very determined termites. But did this deter Maggie? Of course not. She parked her vehicle, stepped out, and surveyed her new domain with the satisfaction of a conquering general. "Well, hello there, beautiful," she said to the decrepit structure. "You and me are going to have some adventures." The local real estate agent, a nervous man named Pete Kowalski, had warned her about the property's unique challenges. He'd mentioned the lack of running water, electricity, and basic structural integrity. He'd even hinted at wildlife issues, with the kind of meaningful glances that suggested he knew more than he was saying. What he hadn't mentioned, and what our thermal scanners had detected 3 days prior, was the current resident. Inside the cabin, curled up in what used to be the living room, lay approximately 150 pounds of muscle, claws, and attitude wrapped in tawny fur. The mountain lion, scientific designation puma concolor, local designation oh crap that's a big cat, had taken up residence 2 weeks ago after being displaced from her usual territory by a forest fire. The female cat, who we'll call Luna for simplicity, had claimed the cabin as her new den. She'd been living quite comfortably there, thank you very much, and had no intentions of relocating for some two-legged intruder. Maggie, blissfully unaware of her new roommate, began unloading her supplies from the truck. She'd brought the basics: sleeping bag, camping stove, enough canned food to survive a small apocalypse, and, inexplicably, a collection of romance novels. Because, apparently, even in the wilderness, Human females require their literary entertainment about unrealistically attractive males with questionable communication skills. "First things first," she announced to the empty forest. "Let's see what we're working with inside." The cabin door hung crooked on rusted hinges, creaking ominously as she pushed it open. The sound echoed through the mountains like a dinner bell for every predator within a 5-mile radius. Inside, dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through gaps in the walls, and the musty scent of neglect filled the air. Maggie stepped inside, her boots crunching on debris and what appeared to be several generations of leaves that had blown in through various openings. She surveyed the interior with the critical eye of someone who'd spent decades dealing with nature's attempts to reclaim human structures. "Not bad," she lied to herself with impressive conviction. "A little elbow grease, some basic repairs, and this place will be perfect." From our observation post, we watched as she moved deeper into the cabin, completely oblivious to the fact that she was being watched by eyes that gleamed like amber jewels in the shadows. Luna, the mountain lion, had awakened from her afternoon nap and was now assessing this strange intruder who'd dared to enter her territory. The cat's body language was fascinating from a xenobiological perspective. Her muscles tensed like coiled springs, ears flattened against her skull, and her tail twitched with the barely controlled energy of a predator, deciding whether this newcomer represented dinner or danger. Humans, in their typical fashion, remain completely unaware of such obvious warning signs. Maggie continued her exploration, stepping over fallen ceiling beams and navigating around a suspicious hole in the floor that looked deep enough to hide a small spacecraft. She was mentally cataloging repairs when she heard it, a low rumbling sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. "What the heck?" she muttered, pausing mid-step. The sound came again, deeper this time, a growl that spoke of ancient power and very sharp teeth. Any sensible being would have immediately retreated to a safe distance, called for backup, and perhaps invested in some quality armor plating. Maggie, however, tilted her head like a confused domesticated canine and called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The sheer audacity of addressing an apex predator as if it were a neighbor dropping by for tea defied all understanding of survival instincts. This is precisely why humans simultaneously terrify and fascinate the galactic community. Luna, equally confused by this bizarre response, emerged from the shadows like a golden shadow given form. She padded silently across the debris-strewn floor, each step placed with the precision of a trained assassin. Her yellow eyes locked onto Maggie with the focused intensity of a laser targeting system. The moment when human and mountain lion first laid eyes on each other stretched like a temporal anomaly. Maggie froze, her hand halfway to her backpack, processing what she was seeing. Luna stopped as well, equally surprised by the human's lack of immediate flight response. "Well," Maggie said after what felt like several small eternities, "I wasn't expecting a roommate." The mountain lion's head tilted slightly, as if she too was questioning the human's sanity. "Especially not one with such impressive teeth," Maggie continued, her voice remarkably steady for someone facing a predator capable of crushing her skull like a particularly fragile fruit. This was the moment that should have ended with either a retreat or a very short, very violent encounter. Instead, something remarkable happened. Maggie slowly lowered her hand, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. She'd spent enough time in the wilderness to understand the basic rules of predator encounters, even if her decision to enter an abandoned cabin alone suggested a temporary lapse in judgment. "Look," she said, addressing Luna as if the cat could understand standard human communication protocols. I bought this place fair and square. $5 whole. But I'm not unreasonable. Maybe we can work something out." Luna's ears twitched forward slightly, a sign that she was at least listening to these strange vocalizations, even if she couldn't comprehend their meaning. "You were here first," Maggie acknowledged, with the kind of diplomatic reasoning typically reserved for hostage negotiations. "And you've obviously been taking good care of the place. No graffiti, no loud parties, very considerate." The mountain lion blinked slowly, which any expert on feline behavior would recognize as a sign of non-aggression. Maggie, fortunately, had spent enough time around various wildlife to pick up on such signals. "So, here's what I'm thinking," she continued, carefully lowering herself into a crouch to appear less threatening. "This place is big enough for both of us. You keep that half," she gestured toward the shadows where Luna had emerged, "and I'll take this half. Separate, but equal, like civilized beings." The absurdity of attempting to negotiate territorial rights with a wild predator using principles of property law was so uniquely human that our analysis department would later spend months trying to categorize it properly. Luna, for her part, seemed to consider this proposal with the seriousness of an experienced diplomat. She sat back on her haunches, wrapping her tail around her paws, and continued to study this strange creature who spoke to her as an equal, rather than screaming and fleeing like sensible prey. The standoff continued for several more minutes, neither party making any aggressive moves. Maggie remained in her non-threatening crouch, while Luna maintained her alert but not hostile posture. It was like watching two experienced negotiators feeling each other out before starting serious discussions. Finally, Luna stood, stretched with the fluid grace that only cats seem to possess, and padded back toward her chosen corner of the cabin. She settled down on a pile of old newspapers that had somehow stayed dry through multiple seasons and fixed Maggie with a stare that clearly said, "We'll see how this goes." "Excellent," Maggie said, as if she'd just successfully negotiated a major peace treaty. "I knew you were reasonable." She slowly rose from her crouch and began to carefully back toward the door, maintaining eye contact with Luna while reaching for her gear. "I'm just going to get my supplies. Don't go anywhere, okay? We're going to be great roommates." As she stepped outside to collect her belongings, Maggie felt a mixture of adrenaline and absurd pride in her successful first contact with her new living situation. Sure, most people would consider sharing space with a mountain lion to be somewhere between incredibly stupid and completely suicidal, but she'd always been different. From our monitoring position, we observed the entire encounter with growing bewilderment. According to every behavioral model in our database, this situation should have resulted in either immediate human flight or human mortality. Instead, we appeared to be witnessing the establishment of an interspecies cohabitation agreement. "Only humans," muttered my observation partner, Zint 14, his tentacles rippling with what I'd learned to recognize as exasperation. Only humans would try to negotiate with an apex predator like it's a landlord dispute. The truly remarkable thing was that it seemed to be working. Maggie returned to the cabin multiple times over the next hour, each time moving slowly and announcing her intentions out loud. "Coming in with my sleeping bag now," she would say, or "just need to set up my cooking area over here." Luna watched each entrance and exit with alert interest, but made no aggressive moves. By sunset, they had established what could only be described as a tentative ceasefire. Maggie had set up her camping equipment in the eastern half of the cabin, while Luna maintained her claim to the western portion. Both parties seemed to acknowledge the invisible boundary line that ran roughly down the center of the main room. "Day 1 of Operation Roommate," Maggie announced while heating a can of soup on her portable stove, "appears to be a success. No bloodshed, no major territorial disputes, and nobody's tried to eat anybody else. I call that progress. Luna, sprawled in a patch of fading sunlight near what used to be a window, opened one amber eye as if to say, "The night is young." As darkness fell over the Rocky Mountains, two unlikely companions settled in for their first night of shared accommodation. Maggie spread out her sleeping bag and opened one of her romance novels, occasionally glancing over at Luna, who had begun grooming herself with the methodical precision of someone settling in for the long haul. "This is either the best decision I've ever made," Maggie murmured to herself as she adjusted her camping lantern, "or the last decision I'll ever make. Either way, it's certainly not boring." From somewhere in the darkness outside, a coyote howled, and both human and mountain lion turned toward the sound with identical expressions of alert attention. For just a moment, they looked less like natural enemies and more like two females protecting their shared territory. The night was just beginning, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, and quite possibly new reasons for the Galactic Intelligence Bureau to question everything we thought we knew about human behavioral patterns. But that, as they say, is a story for another report. Field Report Continuation. Day 2 through Final Assessment. Observer Quill 9, reporting on the increasingly bewildering behaviors of human subject Maggie Torres and her unconventional living arrangement. Morning arrived with the subtlety of a plasma cannon blast. Maggie woke to find Luna sitting precisely 3 feet away, staring at her with the intensity of a scientist studying a particularly puzzling specimen, which, considering the circumstances, wasn't entirely inaccurate. "Good morning to you too," Maggie mumbled, rubbing sleep from her eyes while carefully avoiding any sudden movements. "Sleep well." Luna's response was a slow blink, followed by what could only be described as a yawn that showcased teeth capable of opening cans without mechanical assistance. The morning routine that followed defied every protocol in our species interaction manual. Maggie heated water for coffee, while Luna groomed her morning fur, both going about their business with the casual indifference of long-term apartment dwellers. The only acknowledgement of their unusual situation was Maggie's habit of announcing her movements like a walking tour guide. "Moving to the northeast corner now to brush my teeth," she would say, or "heading outside for morning necessities, back in 5 minutes." Luna would track these announcements with ear twitches and the occasional head turn, as if she was actually maintaining a mental schedule. By the 3rd day, they had established what behavioral scientists would later term parallel domesticity. Maggie worked on cabin repairs while Luna hunted in the surrounding forest, both returning to their shared space by evening like some bizarre version of a suburban couple. The real test came on day 4, when the weather decided to remind everyone why mountain living requires more than optimism and canned soup. "Oh, come on!" Maggie shouted at the sky as thunder rolled across the peaks and rain began pelting the already questionable roof with the enthusiasm of an orbital bombardment. "I haven't even fixed the leak situation yet." Within minutes, water was streaming through multiple gaps in the ceiling, turning their cozy cabin into an impromptu indoor water park. Maggie scrambled to move her supplies to dry areas, while Luna watched the chaos with the detached amusement of someone whose fur provided excellent water resistance. "This is just perfect," Maggie muttered, dragging her sleeping bag toward what appeared to be the only dry corner of the cabin. 4 days into my new mountain life, and I'm about to become a human sponge. That's when Luna did something that left our entire observation team speechless. The mountain lion stood, stretched, and then deliberately moved closer to Maggie's relocated sleeping area. She settled down about 2 feet away, and began grooming herself, as if she was claiming guard duty over the dry zone. Are you making sure I don't get washed away?" Maggie asked, staring at Luna with something approaching wonder. Luna paused her grooming long enough to give Maggie a look that clearly said, "Don't read too much into this, human. I just don't want to break in a new roommate." The storm raged for 6 hours, turning the mountain paths into rivers and the cabin into a percussion instrument played by increasingly aggressive raindrops. Throughout it all, Luna maintained her self-appointed guard position, while Maggie worked to redirect the worst of the water flow using a combination of tarps, cooking pots, and creative profanity. "You know," Maggie said during a brief lull in the storm, "most people would say I'm crazy for staying out here." Luna's tail flicked once, which Maggie chose to interpret as agreement. "But those people have never had a mountain lion as backup during a crisis," she continued, wringing out a thoroughly soaked towel. "I bet you're great in emergencies." As if summoned by her words, the sound of breaking timber echoed from somewhere above them. Both human and cat looked up just in time to see a section of the roof give way completely, sending a cascade of water, wood, and debris crashing down exactly where Maggie's sleeping bag had been originally positioned. "Okay, that settles it," Maggie said, staring at the destruction. "You officially have better survival instincts than I do. From now on, I'm taking location advice from you." Luna's response was to stand, shake the water from her coat with regal dignity, and pad over to investigate the new hole in their ceiling. She sniffed the damaged area, looked up at the rain still pouring through, and then returned to Maggie with an expression that clearly communicated her professional assessment. "This place is a disaster, but it's our disaster now." The next morning brought clear skies and a cabin that looked like it had been attacked by particularly vindictive weather spirits. Water damage was extensive, several new holes decorated the walls, and everything Maggie owned was now classified somewhere between damp and thoroughly saturated. But instead of packing up and admitting defeat like any rational being, Maggie rolled up her sleeves and got to work. "Right," she announced to Luna, who was sunbathing in a patch of light streaming through one of the new ceiling holes. "Time for some serious home improvement. Think you can handle the supervisory role?" Over the following weeks, a remarkable transformation took place. Maggie proved to possess the kind of stubborn determination that had allowed her species to colonize hostile environments across their planet. She patched holes, reinforced walls, and somehow managed to make the cabin not just habitable, but actually comfortable. Luna, for her part, contributed by keeping the local wildlife informed that the territory was occupied by something significantly more dangerous than it appeared. The combination of mountain lion scent and human activity created a buffer zone that even the most persistent scavengers learned to respect. The partnership evolved in ways that continued to baffle our research team. Luna would disappear for days at a time on hunting expeditions, always returning with the satisfied air of someone who had successfully managed their professional responsibilities. Maggie established routines around these absences, using the time for more intensive repair work or for hiking to the nearest town for supplies. Their communication system developed into something approaching actual conversation. Maggie would explain her daily plans out loud, and Luna would respond with various combinations of ear positions, tail movements, and vocalizations that Maggie learned to interpret with surprising accuracy. "Planning to work on the north wall today?" Maggie would announce over morning coffee. Luna might respond with a brief chuff and a head turn toward the area in question, which Maggie had learned meant acknowledged, sounds reasonable. Or if Luna produced a longer growl accompanied by a direct stare, Maggie understood this as terrible idea, human. Reconsider immediately. The system worked remarkably well. 1 month into their cohabitation, Maggie received her first visitor. Pete Kowalski, the nervous real estate agent, arrived unannounced to check on his most unusual client. "Maggie?" he called from outside the cabin, apparently reluctant to approach too closely. "You still alive in there?" "Alive and thriving," she called back, emerging from the cabin with the kind of glow that comes from physical labor and fresh mountain air. "Come on up. I want to show you what we've done with the place." Pete approached cautiously, his city-trained eyes scanning for obvious dangers. "We?" he asked nervously. "Oh, did I forget to mention my roommate?" Maggie grinned with the expression of someone about to deliver the punchline to an excellent joke. "Luna! Come meet Pete." The mountain lion emerged from the cabin with the fluid grace of royalty greeting a particularly inferior courtier. Pete's face went through several interesting color changes as he processed what he was seeing. "That's a mountain lion," he managed to whisper. "Sharp eye," Maggie replied cheerfully. "Best roommate I've ever had. Quiet, clean, excellent security system, and she never leaves dirty dishes in the sink." Pete looked back and forth between woman and wildcat as if he was witnessing a violation of several natural laws. "Maggie, that animal could kill you without breaking a sweat." "So could a lot of things," Maggie shrugged. "Car accidents, heart disease, bad shellfish. At least Luna gives me fair warning when she's annoyed. More than I can say for most people." Luna, apparently deciding that Pete posed no threat to their domestic arrangement, settled into her favorite sunny spot and began grooming herself with the indifference of someone who had more important things to worry about than human social anxiety. "Besides," Maggie continued, "look at this place now." She gestured toward the cabin, and Pete had to admit that the transformation was impressive. The structure that had been falling apart a month ago now stood solid and welcoming, with a new roof, reinforced walls, and windows that actually kept the weather outside where it belonged. "She helped with all this?" Pete asked, still staring at Luna with the expression of someone whose worldview was undergoing rapid reconstruction. "Well, she didn't exactly handle the power tools," Maggie laughed. "But yes, she helped. Good company during the long work days, excellent early warning system for bad weather, and she's got great instincts about structural integrity. Saved me from a roof collapse during that big storm 2 weeks ago." Pete spent the next hour touring the renovated cabin, listening to Maggie explain her various improvements, while Luna supervised from a distance like a furry quality control inspector. By the time he left, he was shaking his head and muttering about updating his insurance policies. Word of the unusual living arrangement spread through the local community with the speed of gossip in small mountain towns. Some people declared Maggie certifiably insane. Others called her the luckiest person alive. A few wildlife experts made the trek up the mountain to observe this unprecedented example of human-predator coexistence. Dr. Janet Mills, a wildlife biologist from the State University, arrived 6 weeks into the arrangement with a head full of theories and a notebook full of questions. "This is fascinating," she told Maggie, while carefully observing Luna from what she considered a safe distance. "Mountain lions are typically solitary animals with strong territorial instincts. The fact that she's tolerating your presence, let alone seeming to collaborate with you, goes against everything we know about their behavior." "Maybe," Maggie replied, watching Luna demonstrate her morning stretching routine. "Or maybe we just don't know as much as we think we do." Dr. Mills spent 3 days documenting the unusual partnership, taking notes on everything from Luna's daily schedule to the subtle communication signals that had developed between human and cat. Her final report would later become required reading in several graduate-level animal behavior courses. "The relationship appears to be genuinely mutualistic," she wrote. "The human provides consistent food security through her supply runs and creates a stable territory that the mountain lion can defend more easily. In return, the mountain lion provides security services and weather prediction that have proven invaluable for human survival in this harsh environment." But perhaps the most telling moment came during Dr. Mills's final evening at the cabin when a black bear wandered too close to their shared territory. Luna's response was swift and uncompromising. She positioned herself directly between the intruder and the cabin, making it clear that this space was under her protection. The bear, reading the situation correctly, decided to find dinner elsewhere. "She's protecting both of you, Doctor," Mills observed with wonder. "This isn't just tolerance. She's actively defending shared territory." "Told you she was a good roommate," Maggie said with pride. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Maggie and Luna settled into the rhythm of their unusual partnership. The cabin had become a true home, warm and solid against the approaching winter. Their communication had evolved to the point where they could coordinate daily activities with barely a word or gesture. When the first heavy snow arrived, they were ready. Maggie had stockpiled supplies and winterized the cabin, while Luna had established a network of shelter spots throughout their territory. Together, they weathered storms that would have challenged either of them alone. On the anniversary of Maggie's $5 purchase, she sat by the fire with Luna stretched out nearby, both of them content in their shared space. "You know what I've learned this year?" she asked Luna, who opened one amber eye in polite acknowledgement. "Sometimes the best partnerships are the ones nobody expects to work." Luna's response was a rumbling purr that vibrated through the floorboards, a sound of agreement that transcended species barriers. From our observation post, we filed our final report on this remarkable case study. Humans, we concluded, possessed an almost supernatural ability to form connections with other species through nothing more than patience, respect, and sheer stubborn determination. The mountain woman who bought a $5 cabin and found a mountain lion inside had done more than just survive the encounter. She had created something entirely new, a partnership that redefined what was possible when two very different species decided to share the same space. As for Luna, she had discovered that sometimes the best territory was one you didn't have to defend alone. Both seemed quite satisfied with the arrangement. Final assessment: humans continue to be absolutely, completely, and utterly impossible to predict. Recommend continued observation, preferably from a safe distance, with adequate supplies of whatever passes for alcohol in our species. We're going to need it.